Hello, everybody, and I welcome you all to the PMP Certification Training Program. In PMP Training Program, what we're going to learn today, we're going to learn today about what is project and its importance of the project management. We will also understand the relationship between project, program, and portfolio and operations management, the key components of project management, how to go about doing tailoring, and the most importantly, some of the project management business documentation. But before we get on to the PMP Training Program, let me introduce myself. My name is Prashant, and I have total experience of 17 years. I worked in different domains like FMCG, pharmaceuticals, even for that matter, the banking domain and sales and marketing, etc. I not only worked in projects, but also I've worked in enterprise level programs. So I'm going to share with you all my experience of working on various projects and how I applied the knowledge, skills, the experience that I've gained so far by working through various projects and programs, and how PMP certification helped me in applying some of these basic concepts as well as some of the specialized concepts in terms of risks as well as the scheduling, etc., that we're going to talk about today. I'm not only PMP certified, but also I'm PMI ACFE certified. So that is one of the best part I have seen here, because with the sixth edition of PMP certification, now the PMI has also ensured that the Agile is embedded as a part of the PMBOK guide, sixth edition, which is already introduced. So I can definitely be in a position then to compare it with the Agile way of working and with the traditional way of working. And also I'll be able to explain with you very well some of these agile concepts that are now embedded as a part of PMBOK guide. Apart from that, I have also done Lean Six Sigma Black Belt certification, and that's really very, very useful, I found. At the same time, considering that there are a lot of Lean and Six Sigma projects where you can also apply some of the learning out of the PMP certification that I have had. It's been over 5 years that I'm PMP certified, and I have realized that attending PMP certification training program is how important when we begin our PMP certification journey. And if you are looking out for such a training program, then you are definitely at the right place, because this training program will help you prepare well for the PMP examination. And PMP certification training program is based on the sixth PMBOK guide edition. And we will be talking about some of the latest editions in terms of the contents that the PMI has ensured to be there as a part of the PMBOK guide, sixth edition. And some of these concepts are covered with the help of examples. In this training, what am I going to do? Basically, I will be taking you through various topics that are there as a part of the PMBOK guide, sixth edition. At the same time, we will also be going through what it takes to get that PMP certification, get that PMP credential, why the PMP credential is important. At the same time, where all the PMP credential could help you in excel in terms of different industries that we see here. Apart from that, we will be also actually going to go through some of the documentation, some of the artifacts of the actual projects that were delivered. So those artifacts, those documents will definitely give you an idea about how you can go about writing a project charter, or how you can go about writing a project documents like business case. So I welcome you all once again to the PMP certification training program. And I can see here John, Matt, Sridevi, and so many of you have joined this training program, and I welcome you all. So if you have any questions, I would like you all to put it in the chat box, and that will help me in taking a pause, reading your question, and I'll try to answer your question then and there itself. Apart from that, also, if you have any question any point in time, you can certainly raise your hand. This is an interactive training program that we're having, and hence feel free to participate and try to converse with me through this virtual mode that we are getting this training program starting. So with this, let's get on to the training program actually. What we will be doing basically is that as a part of this training program, we'll be talking about the introduction first, which talks about a little bit about PMP certification. And this will kind of help us in getting our journey started as far as the PMP certification is concerned. Now, I'm sure some of you may have multiple questions on your mind, like why I should be going for PMP certification. I remember a lot of people asking me questions, especially people from IT as well as non-IT. Now that we also have PMI ACP and we have a PMP certification as well. So why we should go for PMP certification? I strongly believe that for those people who would like to develop their career in the area of project management, and if they want to strengthen their foundation of project management, PMP certification is definitely the one certification that we should look forward to. Apart from that, there are numerous advantages of doing the PMP certification. As you can see here on the screen, some of these advantages we have highlighted. One of the most important benefit I see of doing PMP certification is this is the most recognized certification today in the industry. And not only in a particular industry, but you go to any industry that you work for, this is definitely one certification that the companies are looking into people who are aspiring to become the project managers. This is globally recognized certification by all the industries, as I said. Apart from that, this particular certification, PMP, not only demonstrate your knowledge, but most importantly, it also ensures that you have experience before you apply for the certification. So it takes care of your experience, your education, and the competency. So all this put together makes you the PMP certified individual. And that's its strength. And that's precisely why many industries out there today look for people who are certified into PMP certification. Now, this will certainly help you increase your marketability when you go out looking out for a job, or within your organization when you look out for promotions. One of the things that I have seen certainly gives us edge over competition is this credential, which is PMP certification. And we also found typically people who are PMP certified, people who are PMP professionals, they have got 15 to 20% higher salaries over the non-certified people. So PMP certification will definitely put you on spot and give you edge over many people out there who are looking out for the job opportunities into the project management. Or if you want to develop your career in this area, then you're definitely looking for a right certification. I was just talking about different industries. So we have already listed some of the industries here, but you name the industry and you will find that PMP certification could certainly be a big value add. But to name few industries, as you see on the screen, be it from the water supply to protection to mobile services, education, healthcare, apart from that, even public transportation. So many of these industries that you see today, they actually look out for professionals who are PMP certified when they come and work on any projects, be it IT, non-IT projects across domains and industries. PMP certification is definitely very well recognized. In terms of job opportunities, if you see, sometimes people keep thinking about would there be any job opportunities by doing the PMP certification. So obviously, you have gained some experience into project management. On the top of that, you have done a PMP certification. That will certainly strengthen your case when you go out in the market and look out for the job. As far as the overall opportunities are concerned to the project management role by 2020, they are only going to grow. And as you see on the screen, we've got these opportunities as far as the growth is concerned, as you can see in China, in US, everywhere today, the project management roles are going to go up many folds by 2020. That means there is huge opportunity for you out there in the market to apply for these roles that will be created as a part of the project management. And PMP certification will certainly strengthen your case when you'll go out and apply for some of these roles. Now, how to embark on this journey? As I can see here, Matt asking this question, how to go about really doing the PMP certification? And this question is there, I'm sure, on everybody's mind. Now, when you decide to do PMP certification, first of all, I must appreciate your decision that yes, you have taken the right decision. And we have just now seen why is it so. Now, when you decide to do PMP certification and when you just commit to yourself, yes, I want to be a PMP certified person, then by when should you get started your journey? You should embark your journey approximately 1.5 to 2 months before you actually take the examination. So as you can see here, you take the examination sometimes here, all right? So from that particular date, 1.5 to 2 months before, you actually schedule your examination. And before that itself, you undertake or you undergo a training program. So you attend PMP certification training program. And I would encourage you to attend this training program, which is by Edureka. And this particular training program will certainly cover everything that it takes for you to become PMP certified. Not only the certification, but also other support you will get here. The first and most important support that you will get is once you enroll for the virtual training program by Edureka, a lot of things will be covered. And when you will embark this journey for PMP certification, I'm sure a lot of questions must be there on your mind, and you would always need somebody who can support you, who can guide you. That means you're at the right place. Once you enroll for this program will cover not only the course outline defined by PMI for the PMP certification based on the PMBOK guide, 6th edition, but also a lot of support you will get for submitting application. I've seen many people coming to me and asking me guidance on how to write an application, a successful application, because that's also very important. Your application might get rejected if you do not fill the application properly. So that application, how to really go about writing the application, how to put your experience, how to ensure that you write properly about your project, the experience that you're showing in whichever the project that you have done in the past, how to ensure that you put down the experience which is non-overlapping within the last 80 years, right? So all these things are certainly going to be looked into. And then once the application formalities are completed, let's say before 1 to 3 weeks, then you can schedule your examination. And once the exam is scheduled, the advantage here would be that you would get a target now, that after 2 to 3 weeks, my exam is going to be there, or maybe after 4 weeks, I have got my exam coming up. So that means you get a target date, and this much of time you would get certainly to prepare yourself. Now, by the time you have already attended the training program, that means you have already gone through all the basics and you had gone through various knowledge areas, process groups, as well as definitely a lot of questions which we cover as part of training as well. So all that is already covered. So it will be then very easy for you to prepare for your examination during this period of 4 to 6 weeks after the training is completed, after you schedule your examination. So you will get complete support from the Edureka to fill out your application. Even if your application gets selected for the audit, because approximately 20% application may get selected for the audit, and many times there could be a confusion in terms of how to face audit. There also you'll get a lot of support here and assistance to face the audit from Edureka team. Personalized guidance will be provided by the SMEs like us who actually support delivering the training program throughout this study. And most important thing is that you will have access to the course anytime. So even if you want a particular topic to be repeated, you can always go back, repeat that topic, attend that topic again. You can sharpen your skills. You can revise a particular question, for example, or maybe you want to clarify about understanding on a particular topic or in a particular area. You can always go back and do that. And that's the biggest advantage with this training, I believe, unlike the classroom training. So at times in classroom training, what happens if you're not paying attention? That means you're gone. You can't really go back and ask to repeat the same topic. And after the training's over, then there is no opportunity at all. But here, the biggest opportunity that you would get is you can always go back and play the recording, play the session as many times as you want. Over and above, there are also 1,000 mock questions. And this is the most important thing. Once you are ready for the examination, especially in the last couple of weeks, you should be only focusing on taking up those mock questions. And from where those mock questions will come, you can certainly refer to the Edureka course for the mock questions. And 1,000 is definitely a good number. And I always recommend before we appear for the final exam, once you complete your study, it's important that you should appear for the examination by taking full 200 questions, by sitting at once and taking those 200 questions at once, at least twice before you appear for the exam. That will give you confidence not only of facing questions, but most importantly, sitting at a place for 4 hours, because this exam duration is 4 hours. And all those questions will come from these mock questions that are already designed, taking into consideration various contents and of course the new topics, the new PMBOK guide changes that have happened. So once you clear the examination, once you are PMP certified, obviously you have to renew your certification every 3 years. And even for renewal, you need 60 PDUs, and those 60 PDUs will come from the courses that you will attend through Edureka. So Edureka definitely help there as well. You can get assistance in e-learning for earning different PDUs. There are various courses that you can undergo, and within 3 years, again, you complete 60 PDUs and you can renew your examination successfully. The most importantly, you will get support from Edureka team 24/7 when you will enroll for this course. So I would strongly encourage you all to look no further than enrolling for the PMP certification course from Edureka. So let's continue this session and let's understand more about the training approach overall. How are we going to deliver this training program for you all? So we are going to cover here the PMI's philosophy, which is basically based on the contents that are outlined as a part of the PMBOK guide. So I don't know how many of you got a chance to really see the PMBOK guide, but it's definitely the big book which covers 5 process groups. There are 10 knowledge areas and there are 49 processes. And these 49 processes will ensure that you understand various concepts from project management. For example, how to take care of communication with stakeholders, how to go about putting everything in the charter and ensure that you are authorized as a project manager to work on that project and take decisions. For example, how to do continuous monitoring and controlling of the project activities. So all these concepts are going to be covered as part of this training. And most importantly, for each of these processes, there will be inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. There are these 4 things that we cover as a part of each and every process. So all these 49 processes will be covered and we'll be doing deep dive into inputs, tools, and techniques and output for each of these processes. And we have taken lots and lots of examples. On the top of that, I have also covered some of the actual artifacts of the project, so which gives you an idea about how a project charter actually looks like or how a business case actually looks like. So we'll of course cover as part of this module a business case, the benefit realization plan, and I'll try and also give you an idea about how the project plan typically looks like. On the top of that, we have also covered questions at the end of each of the module. So we have discussed questions, we have reviewed some of these questions, and feel free to participate if you want to clarify the answer of any of the questions that we're going to cover as well today. So if you have any questions from whatever the topics that we covered so far, please feel free to put your questions in the question box that I've already showed you where it is, and start participating in the session. To continue with, we have so far covered about a little bit about PMP certification, a little bit about PMI certification. Now we'll talk more about PMI as an institute. So if you see PMI, it's a very old institute, established in 1969. That means if you actually see, PMI has completed more than 45 years, and it's a global organization with headquarters in USA, Pennsylvania. And it's a project management institute which is based on non-profit organization. It's a non-profit association altogether. Most importantly, this institute is there worldwide in over 171 countries. And over 5 lakh members are associated today with this institute. Now, PMI actually actively engages a lot of professionals across globe. And these professionals are engaged through conducting research in the area of project management, as well as providing access to wealth and information. So lots of wealth of information and resources are available today with PMI related to project management. Now under project management, again, various areas. So that wealth of information you will get to access once you become the member of PMI. PMI also promotes career and professional development, and lots of other certifications also it offers. And most importantly, it offers the opportunity to network and form the communities. So you'll find there are local chapters, there are local PMI chapters where people from the local area, they come and participate and they talk about what's going on in the project management space and exchange their knowledge. They share their knowledge. So that certainly helps big time. As I mentioned, that there are certifications from PMI, like some of you were asking about what else is there apart from the PMP certification. So as you can see here on the screen, to begin with, people they have just started in the project management or they would like to start. For them, certified associate in project management is one of the certification for the beginners in the project management. Then they can move to the PMP certification. Now, people who are working in Agile or would like to have experience, again, they're working in Agile, they have experience in Agile, they can go for PMI ACP certification. Apart from that, if you want to do a deep dive, then go for scheduling professional. So again, you are working in project management and for quite some time, if you want to strengthen your some of these areas like scheduling, so you can certainly do the deep dive into scheduling per se, and then you also complete this certification. Same is the case with risk management. So if you have been practicing project management for quite some time, if you want to get into a sort of a specialization into risk, then I would recommend you the risk management professional. Otherwise, also you can certainly jump into this because risk management is definitely one of the important processes that we talk about as a part of PMP as well. Apart from that, if you want to go for a little next level certifications, like you have been doing project management for quite some time and now you got promoted into program management, so you can certainly go for PGMP is another certification. And from there, again, from program, you can jump on to the portfolio management professional as well as you go ahead up in the ladder in your career. So as you see here, there are lots of different certifications that are available. And some of you, as Matt asked this question, that what could be done if I don't have to go for PMP certification? Is there any other option that I can opt for? So you can opt for so many options. But the fundamental option that you have already chosen for yourself is PMP certification. So even if you complete your PMP certification and if you want to continue your journey into the project management, you can certainly go for the next level, which is program management, or for that matter, the portfolio management as well. I hope I answered your question. Okay, thanks for your confirmation, Matt. All right, then I'm moving to the prerequisite. Now, this certification, the PMP certification requires you, and this is one of the biggest advantage with PMP, unlike some of the other institute I have seen, that it ensures that you have experience, you have completed enough education, at the same time, you have also gained the actual experience of working in the project management, right? So let's take a look at the prerequisite for appearing for the PMP certification. I'm sure some of you must have already gone through the PMP certification brochure, which is available on the PMI site. I would always recommend you to go to the pmi.org and browse the PMP certification brochure because there you will get the latest information always. But as far as the qualification criteria is concerned, for PMP certification, you are expected to be high school diploma or associated degree or anything which is global equivalent, which should be like 60 months plus. And the project experience of 7,500 hours is expected. And of course, 35 contact hours are required. Now, these experience in the project should be within last 8 years is what we need to remember. Contact hours is fine. So you can add contact hours from last. Typically, they ask for 35 contact hours anyways. So this particular training will give you 35 contact hours. So that's another benefit of attending this training program. So you'll get a certificate and you can claim 35 contact hours out of that. The another way is if you are already a bachelor degree holder, then it's pretty straightforward. So in terms of you already have 36 plus months of the formal education. And if you have 4,500 hours of experience, now this experience should be non-overlapping experience. Working into project, not necessarily as a project manager. You could have worked in whichever the domain, whichever the area within the project management, that should be fine. And even here also, the expectation is 35 contact hours. So you don't have to worry about 35 contact hours in this case. And that's the best part because since you all have already enrolled for this program and you are going to get the certification of completion of the training and 35 contact hours, you can claim through that. Now, some of the things that we need to keep in mind that this particular experience should be non-overlapping, as I explained. So if you worked on 2 projects, ensure that those 2 projects start and end date should not be overlapping. Okay, so that is one of the important things. Then project experience should be only from last 8 years and not before that. 20% applications, as I mentioned, are picked up for random audit. So don't worry, even if your application is picked for the audit, we will definitely support you there. And apart from that, once you clear the certification, if you appear for the online examination, you will definitely get the soft copy of the certification and your score, you will immediately come to know if you appear for the online examination. Apart from that, from the prereq point of view, the designation is not an issue. This is another question which some of you were asking just now, that would there be any specific role I should have played? So in a project, there are multiple roles, right? So if you take an example of a software project, You may be a developer, or you may be a tester, or you may be just doing the deployment of the code that is written, or deployment of the releases, okay, or deployment into other environment, etc. So you are contributing, you're definitely the team member to the project that is running, right? So it is not necessary that you need to be project manager to have that experience of 4,500 hours. Even if you have this experience of working on any project by any role, still you qualify for the PMP certification, provided that you have non-overlapping experience of 4,500 hours. And of course, the other prerequisites as we discussed. So I hope this have clarified your question about the qualification criteria to appear for the PMP examination. Now let's get on to the pattern of PMP certification. This is another important thing for us to understand. As I mentioned, PMP examination is 4 hours. So it's definitely longer. And this is where sometimes I have seen people struggle if you do not practice enough. So you have to first of all practice to sit for 4 hours, right? And therefore I mentioned that you need to at least take two full 200 question mock test before you appear finally for the examination. It's conducted in the Prometric Center, so that means it's properly invigilated. At the same time, there is an environment wherein the exam is conducted. So it's an examination environment. You'll find there is a camera and everything. So this examination is conducted in a proper Prometric Center and with proper invigilation. There are 200 multiple choice questions and you'll get 4 hours. Now, out of 200 questions, what is important to notice is 175 questions are only considered for the final score. And there are 25 questions which are pre-test questions. Now, these 25 questions will not be considered for your final score, but you would not know which are those 25 questions. Hence, for you, 200 question is what you need to look for, because you won't be able to differentiate between which are those 25 questions for pre-test and which are those 175 questions. So for you, you have to attempt all the 200 questions. There is no negative marking, definitely, and the examination is developed by individuals or group of individuals. So people who have been working in the project management area for quite some time and they have acquired knowledge and skills and expertise. So these are those individuals who get to participate in the examination. I remember even PMI approached me for PMI ACP examination, but since I delivered training program, hence I didn't get to participate. But otherwise, if you don't deliver the training program and if you want to contribute actively into as a PMI, that individual or the group of people, you can certainly nominate yourself, or sometimes PMI directly approach you as well. Now, after clearing the examination, as I said, you will, if it is an online examination, then you can immediately see the result, and you should be able to then even view your soft copy of the certificate immediately after the examination. I guess there are few hours, but that should be available more or less after the examination is completed successfully. All right, so this is about the examination pattern. Now let's come to the examination fees very quickly. We'll go through the fees that you would be paying. Now there are two options. One is computer-based testing and there is a paper-based testing also available. If you are appearing for the paper-based testing, then your score will not come immediately, right? It will take time. But if it is computer-based, then your score will definitely come immediately. Now, if you see the PM experience and education, we have already covered this part. But what you need to understand is for computer-based exam, the charges are 405. And so read this as members and non-members. All right. So if you are PMI member, the charges for you will be 405. If you are not PMI members, then 555. If it is paper based, for PMI members 250, for non-PMI members is 400. Similarly, we can take a look at the re-examination, computer based and the paper based. So it's always wise, even if you do any math, you would know that it's always good to do the PMI membership, to take PMI membership and then appear for the PMP examination. So you first take the membership. Of course, you first create your account on the pmi.org site. You take the membership and then you go for the PMP certification. This way, you will land up paying more or less the same amount. But the most importantly, you will get membership for 1 year. On the top of that, you will also get a soft copy, the latest PMBOK guide. So that is the biggest advantage here, right? Now you can also go for the PMI local chapter membership. So these membership fees, you can check locally how much are they. And as I mentioned earlier, when you renew your PMP certification after 3 years, you will have to complete 60 PDUs, professional development units, And for these 60 PDUs also, you can certainly take up the courses of Edureka, and these courses will help you gain those 60 PDUs. Right, so if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box so that we can discuss those as well. Most important information, I remember I did mention this earlier as well, but again, I would like to emphasize that if you want to appear for PMP examination, and since you have already taken this decision, go to pmi.org and refer to the PMP handbook. Very importantly, PMP handbook will give you the latest information about everything that it takes to know about PMP examination. Right? So right from the prerequisite to the examination fees to exam retakes, everything, all the information, all the questions that you may have about the exam, you'll be able to get those clarified through this PMP certification. Okay, so that was a bit at a high level about the examination and about PMI, etc. So that was just the basic information that I provided so far about the examination. I hope you all are with me so far. Okay. All right. Thank you for confirming, Suvarna, on that. Okay. Now let's then continue since you all are fine with it. And I just want you to then take you through the basics of the project management. So we'll get started since this is our first class. So we'll get started with the basics of the project management, and then we'll gradually get on to a bit of a deep dive into some of the areas that I have already told you about. So starting with the PMBOK guide. So PMBOK guide is Project Management Book of Knowledge. Now this particular guide, which is published by PMI, and this is considered as distilled version of Project Management Body of Knowledge. And now the 6th edition is available, which is already introduced last year. And this particular 6th edition is basically the source of information now, which is referred across. This PMP training course is based on the 6th edition. And hence, this course will cover everything in terms of your knowledge areas, your process groups, as per the 6th edition of PMBOK guide. Now, PMBOK guide is structured typically like this. So it will have key concepts, trends, and emerging practices, tailoring what needs to be done to tailor a process, considerations for project, adaptive environments, etc. So each knowledge area, you will find these 4 sections. So the way this course is designed is exactly based on the PMBOK guide structure. We'll be also talking about the key concepts from each of these processes that we'll be covering. There are 49 processes that we'll have, and there are 10 knowledge areas that we'll be covering. So under each of these knowledge areas and the processes, we will touch upon key concepts, trends and emerging practices, how to tailor a process, and if you are implementing agile or if it is an adaptive environment that you're working in, then how to go about considering some of the newer concepts from agile and adaptive environments. PMBOK guide is typically structured. It will give you the project environment, 10 knowledge areas, role of the project manager. So this is something that is introduced as a part of the 6th edition. It was not there previously, though it was there, but it was embedded into different knowledge areas. But now role of project manager is going to be covered explicitly as a part of the separate structure, as a part of the separate structure of the PMBOK guide itself, apart from the 10 knowledge areas. And of course, the project management foundations is also covered as a part of this. So I would strongly recommend you, after going through the training program, at least once you should go through the PMBOK guide. It's always good to know the fundamentals of project management and read at least once. Even if it is lengthy, even if it is bigger book, but reading it once is definitely the target that you should take. Okay, let's move on. So fundamental question I'm sure you can ask to yourself is, what is a project? Now, since this particular training, PMP certification training, and this certification is basically for the project, so it's important for us then to learn about the definition of a project. So what is there? Now think from the examination point of view. Objective of this training is to make sure that you prepare for the examination. So as per the PMP certification, what is the definition of a project? So project is a temporary endeavor which is undertaken to create unique product, service, or result. So if you take any project, ultimately you'll get some outcome, and that outcome is unique. That outcome could be you will undertake a project, and at the end of the project, what you will get is a product, all right? Or at the end of the project, what you will get maybe a service, or you will get some result, but that is going to be unique. What you will create at the end of the project is unique. Apart from that, project is a temporary endeavor. So you will always find one thing, that project has a start date and the end date. So project will be ended when you achieve the objectives of the project. Or sometimes it may happen that there is no funding available, or the project objectives are obsolete, or sometimes the project is terminated. There could be various scenarios that you may come across. But definitely another attribute which is also equally true is project is unique. So you'll always find that even though two buildings that sometimes you see those are identical, but at least you'll find some attribute which is unique to each building. So that means if you see put together everything here, you'll find that projects are unique, they are temporary, and they are undertaken to create a unique product, service, or a result. You can take example of an IT project or a non-IT project. If you're developing a product and that particular product development that you have undertaken is for a year's period. So within that 1 year, you actually go through various phases of the project. You could have undertaken a feasibility phase, then you have done the analysis, then you have actually done the development, and then you have implemented it. So you have gone through various phases in order to build that product. And by the end of the 1 year, what you'll produce is that product which you will take it to the market, and then you will sell that product. So that means in this example, we have seen that what's unique is basically that product that you're producing. That product could be any product. It could be IT product. It could be a non-IT product that you're producing. And the project that we have just said has got a start date and the end date. We have got 1 year in between, and within that 1 year, we are doing all the project phases activities. And it's a unique product that you're producing at the end of the day as well, right? Which you can take it to the market. So, of course, as we go ahead, we will take multiple examples of the project as well. But from definition point of view, we need to just remember some of these keywords that from the PMBOK guide and from PMP exam point of view, projects are, of course, unique. They are temporary in nature. And what we produce at the end of the project is product, service, or some result. Now, if you take the examples of like projects drive change, you will come across project why they are initiated. You must be thinking about why projects are initiated. So sometimes projects are initiated to drive change. I have seen that organizations undertaking big transformation projects. Now, those transformation projects are basically to drive change within the organization. I was part of such a transformation project, and the transformation project was about the agile transformation within organization. So it was 18 months project, and that has a start date and the end date, and then a lot of activities were undertaken as a part of this project. And then with an objective, obviously there was objective that they want to shift from the traditional mindset or traditional way of working to the agile way of working. So that was completely a project to drive change at the organizational level. All right. Now, projects could be also undertaken to enable business value creation. Now, value could be tangible or intangible. That's fine. But what is the value? How value is going to be generated in the business? It could be by launching a new product altogether or new line of business, whatever that line of business that you would like to enter into. And you are undertaking a project basically to enter into that new line of business. And that's going to add value. And then you can measure it. How can you measure that value? Obviously, value could be measured in the form of the benefits that you're going to realize once the project or that product is in the market. All right. So sometimes that value could be intangible. By launching that product, service, or a result, you'll be able to achieve the customer satisfaction. Sometimes not everything is measured in the form of value. All right. So customer satisfaction can be measured in the form of value. But definitely, when you achieve the customer satisfaction, you can generate more business out of the satisfied customers. And you can even do the cross-selling of the product. So that's the intangible benefits, which is difficult to measure, but there is definitely a benefit that we can show. So sometimes projects are undertaken just so that we achieve those intangible benefits. There are also projects which are initiated sometimes to meet the regulatory requirement. I have worked on many regulatory projects. Now, some of these projects were initiated so that we can fulfill the regulatory requirements of the customers. All right. So, for example, there are certain, like if you work in the banking industry, there are certain reports which needs to be furnished, which needs to be submitted to the regulators. Now, an IT project is initiated so that those reports are produced out of the data which is gathered from all the IT systems across banks' IT organizations. It's a captive organization typically. And you get data from multiple IT systems, and then that data is ultimately used to prepare various reports which are then submitted to the regulators. So that means you initiate a project so that you can fulfill the regulatory requirement or legal or social requirements to satisfy customer request or need. As I said, that sometimes we initiate a project out of a request that we received from the customers. So sometimes product is already there and now you are getting the change requests just so that we can make enhancement to the products that we are using. We also initiate the project so that we implement or change business or sometimes technology. Technology is another change that I have seen. Suppose if you want to go for the evergreening project, so that's where you actually demise the old infrastructure and you are upgrading to the new infrastructure. So that's purely because of the technological advancements that have happened in the market. And I've seen that companies are investing a lot of money in changing their technology stack, especially with the DevOps coming in. Every company wants to make themselves DevOps ready so that they can establish the continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline, build pipeline, and then deploy more frequently to the customers so that they can capitalize on the deployments that are happening. Or they could be also created out of the, let's say you want to improve a product or release some fixes, etc. So even those could also be the reason why the project gets initiated. So projects, as you can see here, the project could get initiated due to various reasons. Now, some of the examples we can take here, which are specific to these categories that are listed down. So first could be developing a new product, service, or a result. So let's say you are working in an automobile industry and there is a strategic vision that your owner of the company has to manufacture a car which is priced least, the cheapest car. So that's the strategic vision that your owner of the company has. And with that vision, you then start working on a product. So that means you undertake a project which will produce a product to fulfill that vision, all right? And that vision is to manufacture a car with, or I would say, the cheapest car in the market. So that cheapest car in the market, to manufacture that, obviously, for that product to manufacture, you will undertake a project, and that project may run for 3 years, for 2 years, or even for 4 years, depending upon the complexity of the project, etc. But ultimately, what you get at the end of that project is that product, which is cheapest, right? You may succeed or you may fail in the project. That's a different thing. But ultimately, the outcome of the project is some product, or it could be some service. All right. So if you are launching a customer care service, let's say you are into a call center business, and then you are providing services to your customers. So there are various such services that you could introduce, and just to launch those services, you could undertake various projects, or there could be some result ultimately that we may get as a result of the project that we have undertaken. It could be effecting a change in structure, process, staffing, or style of an organization. I have seen sometimes that projects are undertaken so that the structure of the organization may undergo a change, or for that matter, the process improvement. You must have seen a lot of process improvement projects. So I gave you example of Lean Six Sigma project, which are undertaken so that we can make the process lean, we can enhance the productivity, etc. Or I have seen even the projects are undertaken to reduce the cost associated with staff. So maybe you undertake a project wherein the solution is to put the robotic process automation, RPAs, and through RPA, you are actually cutting down the staff cost. So that's another example of a project so as to introduce change. Projects are also undertaken for developing or acquiring a new or modified information system. So you are procuring new hardware or software. So sometimes those are like infrastructure projects which are undertaken just so that you replace the old hardware which is no longer supported by the OEMs of those hardwares whom you bought that hardware. Or for example, software. So a lot of evergreening, as I said, sometimes if the software is not supported, you would like to either upgrade that or you would like to change the solution. One of the biggest reasons for this could be the security issues. So you want to protect yourself from the security threats that these days we see coming through. The another opportunity is conducting a research efforts. So we conduct a research efforts, and obviously what we get at the end of that research effort is some outcome. Construction, I think this is pretty straightforward. You're constructing a bridge, or you're setting up an industry, or it could be a big turkey project that you're undertaking, or for that matter, if you are changing any business process. So lots of these examples that you would see here. I hope with this set of examples now, it must be very clear to you that project is a temporary endeavor with start date and end date, and what we get is unique and that is product, result, or some service at the end that we get out of a project. So what is the importance of project management ultimately? So why we are doing whatever the efforts that we have been talking about, why we are putting in so much of efforts. So project management is all about applying the knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. But in order to apply these knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques, first of all, we need to know which are those knowledge, what is that knowledge, what are those tools and techniques. If you don't know, how would you apply? And that's what exactly we train people on. So this training actually talks about knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. Skills, of course, you acquire as you go on applying the knowledge. But for that, you need to know what kind of a skill set are required. Now, it is also required because there is a cutthroat competition that's there in the market. So if you want to prove yourself that you are different and that you are sharp, and at the same time, you have got those skills that are required to be there, so as to be effective, so that you can effectively manage the project and not the poor project manager for that matter. So how would you be able to distinguish that? So there are certain things that are required here actually. So effective managed project, which actually helps individuals, groups, public or private organizations for few things for sure. So one is of course meeting the business objectives. What are the business objectives that you have visualized yourself or that you have actually drawn? So those business objectives will be achieved. So as I said, manufacturing of the cheapest car, if that's the strategic vision with which you have started the project, you achieve that business objective by the end of the project. Satisfy stakeholder expectations. So you deal with n number of stakeholders on the project. Again, depending on the complexity of the project. So how would you satisfy the needs of the stakeholders, the expectations of the stakeholders, the changes that they are requesting? So you'll be able to do that if you do it effectively. And overall chances of success will go up. Most importantly, managing the constraints of project. You'll be able to manage project constraints effectively if you have those skills and if you have that knowledge. And risks is another important key area. How do you manage risks? So you'll be able to learn to manage risks through the different tools and techniques that we'll be covering as a part of this training. Delivering product on time is the key to successful project. As we always say, we have project constraints. Of course, we'll be talking about those. And those project constraints we need to keep on mind and ensure that we are delivering the project within those constraints of the project. When you begin working on the project, you will come across multiple changes from the stakeholders. So if you don't know how to manage change effectively, you will struggle to accommodate that change within the project that you're working on. And therefore, in order to effectively manage project, you need to have the skills and tools and techniques. Poorly managed project would certainly lead to multiple disadvantages here. There could be a failure in achieving the objectives, missed deadlines, cost overruns. We come across these situations, right? Whatever the project budget that is given, I have seen sometimes project manager land up paying more or land up spending more than how much is the budget given. Or there could be a compromise in the quality of the outcome that is being produced. Or they may land up in doing a lot of rework, and rework is a waste and that requires a lot of money. And all these lead to unsatisfied stakeholders for that matter. So therefore, project management is definitely very important, and hence we need to learn the associated knowledge and the skills that are required to manage project effectively. And obviously, we need to also know what are the tools and techniques that are required. And most importantly, we need to be using the right tool and right technique at right time. So that's what is going to be covered as a part of this training. So we'll be covering each and every processes, and we'll be covering each and every tool and technique that is required. Now, if you see project management as a methodology, now each organization I have seen, they have done some sort of a customization. It's not like they may follow whatever we are going to talk about as it is. So there's going to be always a customization. So templates, I have seen every organization will have their formats, will have their own templates. There will be policies around how to manage vendors. There will be policies around how to go about doing the human resource management, etc. There will be certain processes over and above what we're going to cover, which are specific to the organization as well. And there are a lot of guidelines that are available as well. But most important thing is, when we talk about a methodology, we're talking about we should be able to plan project properly, monitor it properly, and control the project properly within the organization. And to do that, what is required is going to be covered as a part of this training. So PMP certification training will actually cover the project methodology as a whole, and that will give you an idea about what kind of template I should be using when I put or when I start working on the project charter, or when I create a business case, how I should be going about doing that? Or what policies I should be, bare minimum policies I should be having, right? What kind of a guidelines I need to follow when I'm doing a particular thing? So from project management methodology point of view, these are some of the areas that are needs to be looked into. Okay, so if you have any questions, of course, feel free to put them into the chat box that is provided so that we can also answer those questions as we proceed. All right, so right now I don't see any specific question as such coming in. So I hope you are with me on the training so far. Okay, so I got a confirmation from John that so far so good. So we are going on fine. Thank you for confirming that. Savita is fine too. All right, thank you. So let's then just continue with the same pace. Now let's move on to one of the most important points, which is about constraints of the project. So we call it as compensating factors or project constraints. If you ask me how the project manager's performance is reviewed or performance is judged, I would say it's based on how that project manager is overall managing the constraints of project. Because every project will have these constraints. When I'm saying constraints, what does that mean actually? So there are these 6 constraints that we talk about: scope, time, cost, quality, risk, and resources. Now they are constraints because even if you change one, at least one other will get affected. If you increase the scope of the project, obviously cost might go up, right? If you don't increase the cost, and if you're just increasing the scope, risk might go up and quality might go down, right? At the same time, if you reduce the time, if you want something to be deployed early or finished early, then obviously we need to increase number of resources. If you don't increase number of resources, then it's going to cost you. Either you will not be able to complete all the scope or you will not be able to achieve the quality that is expected to be there. So you have to play around with these constraints. So effective project manager would know how to deal with these constraints. And most importantly, if there is change to any of these constraints, it's important to go back and update the relevant documents that are being created. So it could be a scope management plan, risk management plan, or resource management plan. So we need to go back and update these documents as well if there is any change to the constraints, right? So from that point of view, these constraints are very, very important to manage. And these constraints needs to be managed from the point of view of the stakeholders. They should also be satisfied, because if the scope is not fulfilled, your stakeholders might not be then satisfied. So how can you deal with a scenario wherein you are behind the schedule? That means either you have to reduce the scope or you have to delay your project by maybe a couple of weeks. So you are in such a situation. Then how would you handle this situation? And that's where the project manager's skills and knowledge will come into picture. So how can you go back to the stakeholders and understand the importance? Is it scope delivering is important as it is, or is it the schedule that is important? Like when I was working on a regulatory project, so from the regulator's point of view, the most important was delivering it within the time, because that timing is most important. Otherwise your company might be fined. You will have to pay the regulatory fines. So from the scope point of view, we had to go back and reprioritize the scope items. So there were certain scope items which were just good to have, so we had to really drop them off. And whatever rest of the scope items, we have then taken them ahead within the available schedule. So what's important here is to understand how you can make use of these constraints to the best of your knowledge and to go back and negotiate with the stakeholders. All right, so I hope now I have made it clear the most important thing, how to deal with project constraints. All right, so I see a question here from Matt, that how do we manage project risk? All right, so Matt, so basically to manage a project risk, we kind of start working on the project risk management right from the beginning of the project itself. So like in our project, what we do is that we have a risk workshops to identify various risks that we might face on the project. So we first identify all the possible risks that we might face on the project. We prioritize those risks. Then we have to also do the quantitative and qualitative analysis of the risks. Then create a risk response strategy. So that risk response strategy could be, we may like to mitigate few risks. We may like to also accept few risks if there is no good option that is available, or if the cost of mitigation is higher than the cost of the risk, overall risk, then sometimes we might have to accept that risk as well. Or sometimes we might have to transfer the risk. So risk response strategy needs to be agreed upon. And then we assign the risk owners. Those respective risk owners will then ensure that before the risk occurs, the risk response needs to be implemented. All right. And all this execution happens as per the risk management plan that is created in the beginning of the project itself. So all these things that I've just now covered is going to be covered as part of this training, where I'm going to actually show you the risk management plan. I'll be actually taking you through the examples of how do we identify risk, how do we do qualitative and quantitative analysis of the risks. At the same time, what are those different risk response strategies that we come up with? So don't worry, hold on. But for now, just to answer your question, I have just given you this high level idea. And then we are going to do a deep dive into each of these processes as we go ahead. I hope this answers your question, Matt. Okay, so he's saying that he's happy to get this input so far. Okay, thank you, Matt. All right, so let's get started then. From here, so we'll continue and we'll talk about now the project, program, portfolio, and then OPM as well. So talking about project and strategic planning. So let's get started with the project and strategic planning first. So typically what happens, if you talk about a program, it's always made up of multiple projects. And a portfolio would have projects and programs put together. And then that's how ultimately everything is aligned with the organizational goals, objectives, or whatever the strategic plan that is created. So I gave you this example of if you want to manufacture a cheapest car, if that is a vision, high level strategic plan that is created, then probably you might need to run multiple such programs and the projects, because it's a complex project altogether, right? You will have to run multiple projects, and this program would include a lot of components in it. Okay, so component would be, there could be a vendor management activities that needs to be separately handled. There could be activities wherein establishing a plan where this assembly line, for example, where this car would be manufactured. Or for that matter, there could be another component altogether in order to source the material that is required in the cost that we're looking out for. That's another component altogether. So based on these components, then you would form various projects within this itself. So setting up the assembly line could be a project in itself. All right. So procuring the material, right, or sourcing the vendors to procure the material just in time could be another project in itself. So that's how typically happens. So you have some strategic guideline, you have some strategic vision or a plan for that matter that triggers various projects and programs. And then all those becomes a part of the ultimate portfolio. At that level, the overall governance is managed. So program and the project management will ensure that the programs and the projects are managed in a right way. So that is very, very important. The most important thing is you need to categorize these programs. So for example, you have the programs which are similar kind of a project should be part of that program. Of course, we'll take example as we go ahead. But portfolio management aligns with portfolios. So what we can do is that probably we can take an example and then it would be in a position and then we can come back and also see what exactly we mean to say. So this particular example is to understand the difference between project programs and a portfolio. So at a portfolio level, what you're basically deciding is, so that's your maybe strategic plan. You're planning to put up a new line of business in the organization. So strategically, that's what you have decided. So you could run a market research project for that. Okay. So would it be really feasible to go ahead and set up a new line of business altogether? So you're doing a market research activity, which is a separate project in itself. Now, if you see the kind of programs that I might need to create under this portfolio would be marketing. Okay. So when I'm setting up a new line of business, I need to think about how am I going to market that? Then I would also need to think about the application development as a separate component altogether. Then content development would be there. So I would run these 3 different programs, and under these 3 different programs, there could be multiple projects running. Like under marketing, I would have a product launch as a separate project altogether. So all the activities that are pertaining to product launch would then be carried out under this project. Or new market development would be another project in itself. So these couple of projects, which are related projects, which are linked projects, would then be clubbed with this component, which is marketing as a program. Similarly, for the application development, I would look into various things as well. Like for example, I would think about a web application, Android and the iOS based application as well. So then I would club these related projects under this program, which is application development. So this will actually ensure when I complete all these three projects, I'll be able to complete the application development program as a whole. Similarly, in case of content development, so I would need to look for the content. Now my project could be classified based on maybe class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4 contents. Okay, so this is just one example, one representation. You could do it multiple ways as well. There are multiple ways to do that. But this is one way which will give me a better visibility, better opportunity to establish a proper governance at a portfolio level and thereby control what's going on in each of these projects and programs. Now, if you talk about operations, so operations will focus more on the ongoing activities. So now operations will come into picture once we launch. So for example, once the application is built and it is launched, then the operations will come into picture. Until then, you are actually working within the project itself or a program. So project and operations may intersect. This is very important to understand actually. So we have seen a project. Now we have seen operations as well. Operation will come into picture once you launch the product or a service into market. And then you start supporting that, then you start making enhancements, or then you start supporting the customers, etc. So what is important here is that though operations team will take the full control once the product is in the market, but that intersection happens at multiple points. And which are those points where the intersection happens? One is, of course, when developing a new service or a product, you need to involve the operations team as well, so that they would know that something like, let's say, the web application is coming on their way for support. You could also do that when you improve the operations. So sometimes what happens when there is an existing application and then you're enhancing. So again, you engage the operations team as well. Most importantly, at the end of the product lifecycle, there would be a proper handover between the project team and the operations team. So that handover has to happen properly, and we need to pass on all the relevant documents to them. And at the end of each phase closure, we need to also invite the operations team so that there is a proper handshake happening and they are not engaged only towards late in the project. So some of these things needs to be taken into consideration. So I hope this example must have given you a fair idea about program, project, and how a typical strategic plan initiate the launch of a program and a project. So project, program, and portfolio is clarified. So portfolio, which is typically at a strategic level. So this is where the collection of projects or programs happen. We have just taken one example here, and they are basically grouped together so that we can facilitate them effectively from overall governance and management point of view, which will ultimately help in achieving the strategic objective. So in earlier example, the strategic objective was to launch a new line of business. So that's how it is. Program is where we collect projects together, and they are definitely interrelated, or sometimes they are interdependent as well. But most importantly, they obtain benefits which are not available from individual components. So if you see, only the web application will not give you as much benefit as even when you add the Android app or iOS. So when they put together, then application development as a program will deliver much more benefits. Multiple interrelated projects needs to be run parallelly. So sometimes they are run parallelly, sometimes they are also dependent, right? So they could be run in series or they could also be run in parallel. Now, projects, they are generally dependent on each other and serve a common outcome. So if you see typically is that, let's say class 1 and class 2, there could be a bit of a dependency as well in terms of content, okay, a baselining or delivery for that matter. Or there could be a bit of a dependency between what you're developing as a web application and then Android and iOS. So generally, that's what is observed within the project. So we need to ascertain what's that dependency level, and we need to manage that dependency level effectively as well when you are working on project and programs. All right, so moving from there altogether, so we just covered up what is a project, program, and portfolio, and we have taken one good example to classify this, to differentiate this, and as we progress, we are going to take more examples as well. So organizational project management. So if you see the OPM, so this is specific to the organization now we're talking about. Now this is a framework where we talk about project, program, and portfolio management. All this is integrated so that we can achieve the organizational objectives ultimately. And for that reason, it's basically integrated. How does this work? Now, if you think from the application point of view now, so you have project, program, portfolio management knowledge, and now you're applying it, and that's where the organizational objectives will come into picture. So you have a strategy, right? So we have taken example here that we have some strategy, which is launch a new line of business, all right? And then you decide the portfolio value decisions. Okay, then we have the business impact analysis is done, program and project results are delivered, operations will start here. Okay, the value performance analysis is carried out right from identifying the strategy, because value will start coming in only once you launch that line of business. So programs and projects will be a part of this section, and then there's a portfolio here. Okay, so what we need to understand is that same example you can apply here as well. So in order to achieve the strategic objectives of launching a new line of business, then obviously you are aligning with the portfolio, whichever the portfolio that you're working in. Then there are multiple projects and programs that you're running here. Okay, and once you complete those programs, you will be able to then deploy that to the production team or to the operations and support team. And once they are out in the market, then only the value will start coming in. Then you start measuring that value. So in the beginning itself, you create a sort of the business realization plan, or the business benefit management plan, and you try to measure the business benefit against that business benefit measurement plan. So this is more or less the same thing as what we covered earlier. Here we are just trying to put it in the form of OPAs. All right, so let's just move on to PMBOK guide now. Since we are just talking about PMP certification training here, so we need to also know a bit more about PMBOK guide and how the PMBOK guide is structured. So we did cover the high level structure, but there are a few more things that we need to know about PMBOK guide, especially at the component level, and at the same time, how these process groups, the knowledge areas, the processes, how they are aligned, how they are interlinked. So let's talk a bit more on these quickly. So I'm just going to take you through each and every component very quickly. So project life and phase. So what is project life cycle ultimately? Project life cycle is nothing but contains series of phases. You must have seen, for example, SDLC. So project life cycle, which is software development life cycle. All right. So when the software development life, so when the software is built, we go through various phases. All right. So those phases, that happens in series. So we've got a phase called maybe the initial assessment, that is done feasibility, we call it as. So initiation, we can call them as. So then we have requirement, and then we have, of course, you analyze them, you create design, right? So you build, you test, you deploy. So all these are nothing but your life cycle phases. Then the project phase. So project phase is collection of logical related project activities. So you could differentiate between the project life cycle and the project phase as well. So project lifecycle is a very generic at a high level. So for example, feasibility is one thing, or analysis is another phase, or implementation is another phase. So from the project lifecycle point of view, the project phase could be requirements gathering. So you have gathered requirements, which is logically based on the activities that you're performing, or design, which is again activity of designing that you're performing. So we can differentiate here, thin line difference that we see. Then these are specific to project, these are very generic. Then we have a phase gate, so which is a review that happens typically at the end of the phase. So once the requirement gathering is completed as a phase, then we produce a document called as requirement specification document, and that is reviewed. So that is my sort of a milestone that I can say that I achieved by the end of the requirements phase, and that needs to be reviewed then, which of course may get modified later if required, but that's fine. Project management process. So this is now, if it is a process, then obviously typically process has series of activities which are interdependent, and then which you perform to achieve a specific objectives. So here also, for example, if you take example of, let's say, a communication management plan. So when we work on the communication management plan, ultimately our objective is to create an approach. How are we going to communicate to all my stakeholders in the project that I'm working on? So that's how typically it happens. The project management process groups. So again, when logically the grouping of project management inputs, tools, techniques, and output happens, so that particular group, you can define it as a project management process group. So in PMP here, we have these 5 groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. So these are the 5 process groups that we have. All right. So of course they cut across all the phases of the project. and they are going to be there actually. So when you are starting right from the feasibility of the project, you would again you would have to initiate the feasibility, you would have to do planning for the feasibility, you would have to execute the tasks within feasibility. So that means these are not phases. What I mean to communicate here is that initiating, planning, executing are not the phases of the project, but these are the process groups, and these process groups would fall in each and every phases. Now, what are the knowledge areas? Now, these are the basically ones that are identified areas of project management. And these are the areas of project management where we basically learn about the different processes, right? We understand the different inputs, outputs, tools, techniques from each of these knowledge areas. So if you talk about any knowledge area, if you pick up, okay, so you would need to then understand what are some of the tools, techniques, and the inputs and outputs. So let's take example here. So I'm also going to give you the idea about some of these examples wherever possible. So I use this as a supporting material, okay, so that we can take some examples. All right, so starting with, let's say, the plan scope management is one of the processes that we talk about here, right? So plan scope management is basically one of the knowledge areas that we talk about, and under that there are inputs, tools, techniques, and output, as you can see on the screen. So these could be the inputs for planning, right? Project charter, then various plans like quality management plan, project lifecycle description, development approach, etc. So these are my inputs to the scope management plan. What tools and techniques can I use when I do the scope management? One is, of course, I use expert judgment, as well as I'll do alternative analysis. So as a part of this training, we take a deep dive and actually come up with examples in terms of how to do the alternative analysis. So we try and cover some of these examples. We actually cover the scope management plan, and I'll be telling you guys, how the scope management plan looks like and what else should be, what are the components of the plan and what needs to be added into the plan as well. Similarly, what do we expect out of this process? So by the end of this particular process, we should get the scope management plan in itself, and we should also get requirements management plan, right? So this is just one example of the project management knowledge area. So scope management is one of the knowledge areas. So this entire training, PMP training, is based out of these knowledge areas. So we're going to cover all these 10 knowledge areas, and under each and every knowledge area we'll be talking about tools and techniques and inputs and outputs, right? One example I just now gave you. Okay, so this covers all the components. Now talking about life cycle, as you can see here, project life cycle, it would have like you start the project, you do a bit of a planning, then you actually execute the activities, and then you end the project. Now this process group, as I said earlier, will be a part of all these phases of the project, okay? Because for planning, we'll have to again initiate the planning activity, we'll have to actually do the planning, then we have to execute that plan, etc. Right? So that means this is going to be definitely a part of this. There are 10 knowledge areas, right? So for example, communications management, stakeholder management, scope management, right? Risk management, etc. There are 10 of these. And these 10 knowledge areas, we will cover each and every of these knowledge area with many examples and actual artifacts, as I said. Okay, then there will be a phase gate, like we took one example here, project phase, etc. timeline. Okay, so this covers everything that I'm supposed to be covering as a part of PMBOK guide. Now let's quickly get on to a project lifecycle. So if there are no more questions so far, then we can talk about project lifecycle. Okay, so here now I have a question here coming up. As I can see, the question is from John, and then he's asking about how the training is organized. So John, as I mentioned here, that this training is based on knowledge areas. So you'll find each and every module is going to be covering the knowledge areas. Let me just give you a brief about how this training is going to be conducted. As you can see on the screen, we have the different process groups. So we have got initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. And under each of these process group, there are various processes. So total, there are 49 processes that we'll be talking about, right? And there are 10 knowledge areas. So these knowledge areas are mentioned here horizontally, right? So project integration management is biggest one. So we'll start with integration management. Then we have scope management. Then we have stakeholder management, all right? Then cost management, quality management, resource management, communications management, risk management, procurement, and stakeholder management. So these are those 10 knowledge areas which we will cover. Now, each of these knowledge areas will have multiple processes within them, which actually cut across multiple process groups. So, for example, project integration management will have processes from each of these process groups. Okay. But if you see scope management, we'll have mainly the planning, because it's all about most of these things that we do as part of planning, and some bit of the monitoring and controlling activities will happen. So this training is basically organized based on these knowledge areas. So there will be a modules on these knowledge areas. We'll be covering a module: integration management, scope management, schedule management. These are the modules that we'll be covering as part of this particular training. And we'll of course monitor the progress through this sheet that I'm showing you just now. Okay, so I hope I have answered this question to you, John. Okay, so John is happy with the answer overall. And I'm sure you can look forward to more in terms of gaining the in-depth knowledge on each of these knowledge areas as we proceed with the training. Thank you. Okay, so let's proceed for now. So we have project lifecycle and product lifecycle. We'll just quickly take a look at this. So project lifecycle will have these phases, as we already spoke about. So we have a feasibility, analysis, design, implementation, etc. These phases, you could name them based on the industry that you're working on. And this phase is the whole idea of working in this phases is basically that I can certainly look forward to some milestone at the end of the phase. So when I complete feasibility, I would know that whether it is possible to continue working on this project or not. For example, the product that I will be working on, whether there would be market available or not. So as a part of the feasibility study, whether the solution that I will be building, would it feasible to build the solution or not. So all this feasibility study I would do from the point of view of whether it is at all possible to make that product or not. Okay, so all that I would do, again, technical feasibility, business feasibility, so all these aspects will be covered as part of that. As I said, that project lifecycle is based on the industry that you're working in. If it is just an example, if it is an IT software industry, then typically your project lifecycle would be like requirements gathering phase, analysis, design, development, testing, implementation. These are the phases that we go through. Okay. Similarly, in pharmaceuticals, it will be different. In construction, it will be different. In industry that you are working on, it could be different. But ultimately, at a high level, these phases will give us some framework to work through, and we go on achieving the milestones. And most importantly, these phases will help us in establishing the project governance as well. Now, these phases could be done sequentially or they could be overlapping. So it depends on the phase that you're working on. So face-to-face relationship could vary, as you can see. And if we are doing the overlapping, then it's also called as fast tracking. So there are concepts like fast tracking and crashing. So we'll be covering these concepts as part of the training. And stay tuned. I'm sure you would be happy to know that there are two different ways through which we can actually move the project a little bit faster. So by doing the fast tracking or crashing. So what is fast tracking and what is crashing? The project is what we'll be covering as we proceed. For now, you have to stay tuned for that, right? Okay, so we just covered about the project. Now let's also quickly talk about the product lifecycle and try to understand what is project and the product lifecycle very quickly. Now, understand one thing, the project lifecycle could be a multiple project lifecycle within the product lifecycle. So once you have a product, right, this is a product lifecycle, you can undertake multiple projects. But when you create a product for the first time, so you have one such project that you have undertaken, right, to launch that product, right? So the same example, if we have to continue, right? So let's say you have launched or you have kickstarted that project to come up with a cheapest car in the market. So that was your idea, right? And then you started your project. You had gone through different phases of the project, and then you introduced that car here. So you have taken up one project here, and then your outcome is, of course, the product that you're launching. And then the product lifecycle starts here. So product lifecycle typically goes through these various phases, right? So you have an introduction phase. So car is there in the market, and then since it's the cheapest car, so of course you've got a sales, then you're in a growth phase. And then after a few years, you realize that because there is a competition, a lot of other cars are also coming up, and because even others have started realizing this market. So then the maturity level is what slowly the product starts achieving. This is where you're selling at peak. And then because of the competition, etc., your sales start declining, right? And then gradually you stop enhancement on that product, and then you just sell whatever is selling. and then that's how that product ends. But during this entire product life cycle, you might do multiple projects. So for example, you are enhancing the car by doing the multiple projects. So you're doing the facelifting of the car, right? Or you're doing complete makeover, wherein you're actually doing changes you're doing in the engine. So when you're at a growth phase, you're actually undertaking a project wherein you would like that car to maybe do some sort of changes so that it will appeal to young crowd, young generation, depending on your marketing strategy, depending upon what's driving this growth. You would undertake multiple projects. So you have taken up a project, and the outcome is a cheapest car that you launched in the market, and now your product lifecycle started, and within that product lifecycle there are a number of phases that you are going through, and then you are undertaking multiple projects within the product lifecycle in order to ensure that you keep up the sale of the product as much as possible. So that's typically the difference between the product and the project lifecycle. So thank you so much, everybody, for participating in this training, in this module. Thank you.